Kurt Bartley is joining us to talk about how to cope with loss. Kurt is a chartered advisor of philanthropy and since 2016 has been the senior director for gift and estate planning for the University of Texas at Arlington, the UTA. Kurt works with alumni, faculty, staff, and friends who are planning to include UTA in their will or other estate planning vehicle. Kurt has been engaged in fundraising and development with higher education since 2011. Kurt is married to Catherine and their daughter lives in Chicago. Kurt, thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome. I look forward to it, Derek. Thank you.
So Kurt, when we talk about how to cope with loss, that can be a very difficult topic for many people. So let's start from the very beginning. Could you give some examples of losses that people may experience?
Well, I think one of the losses that most of us have some connection to over the years is the loss of a loved one, whether that be a parent or relatives, grandparents. But a lot of times it's other types of things that may not be qualified as losses, but can be. A job, losing a job is a loss because there's an emptiness, something is removed. So there's a loss in losing a job. Things in the past year with the way of life, that's a loss from COVID. You know, the whole thing of people working at home, people having different types of work settings, those are losses. So a loss can come in a variety of settings. And the key piece here is to pay attention that something has changed, something has been removed.
That's so well phrased. Many people, I think of loss just as another human being, but there's life experiences that people grieve over that may not have known it's okay to grieve over. And like you said, a sense of loss has occurred. So let's say someone has experienced a loss just recently. What's the first thing you suggest they do?
I'm going to say stop and sit and think. And think about what it is they're feeling.
Yes.
Try to identify it, maybe even journal it, write it down. Sometimes transferring thoughts that are in the heart or maybe in the head to paper are very helpful to sort some of those things out. So I'd say, stopping, sitting and thinking, and maybe writing along the lines are good things to get started with. I think you also need to name 3 to 5 people that are most important to you in life, because you want to begin to identify the resources, the gifts of people that you have in your life already. If you've lost something or someone, it's important to know what you have and to pay attention to that. And also then to be listing 3 to 5 things, identifying 3 to 5 things that maybe you need to be focusing on and saying, I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for this skill. I'm grateful for this talent. I have this relative. I have this resource. These are things I can be grateful for. Those help us realize our resource base and kind of reestablish a baseline for what is important to us at this time.
That's so well said. You mentioned journaling, Kurt. For some people who may not be familiar with that, how does someone go about journaling? Like, let's say they've got a piece of paper or a notepad. What would you suggest they write? Like, what would be the process that they should follow to do that?
Great question, Eric. Journaling is not an easy thing sometimes because it feels like, well, what am I going to write on this blank piece of paper?
Yes.
And in reality, it's just beginning to transfer thoughts. What are you thinking? And start writing them. They don't need to be a sentence. They can be simple phrases. You can be disjointed in your thinking. It doesn't have to have fluidity. It doesn't have to be making sense. It's just trying to put things that might be in your head, in your heart. I'm feeling sad right now. Write that down. I really miss my daughter, in particular, since she moved back to Chicago. I mean, hey, that's a loss. And write those things down. Say what's in your head. Just put it on paper.
That's good. That's good. What are some healthy ways that people can cope with loss?
I think probably one of the most important things is finding ways to connect with those special people I noted earlier. Being in touch with them through preferably in person
Yes.
and talking. Understand today getting together is important to be doing safely, but at the same time, when you have the opportunity to be in person with someone, then that way you can begin to share some of those important feelings that you're maybe putting down on paper or journaling, and beginning to share those thoughts. I would like to share with somebody, I miss my daughter. She was my coffee buddy for 4 months, and then moved to Chicago. That's like someone leaving home. There's a void. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've got to be able to talk about that and share that feeling. There's nothing right. There's nothing wrong about those feelings that you have, but it is important to pay attention to them and share them. Also, take care of your physical body. Do some exercise. Walking, if at anything, is probably the best. Getting outside and walking, just taking in fresh air, moving your body. If you do regular kinds of exercise, great, go for it. But if you don't, then at least get some walking in. That helps lessen some of the anxiety and stress and sadness that may be going along with the loss that you're dealing with. Also, eat healthy. Do your best to remind yourself that eating good food is important. What goes in is important. And then to get enough sleep. Sleep is healing. And, as we adults, 7 hours, sometimes 8 hours, just depends. Younger children or young adults, they may take longer. But for us, get some good rest. Take breaks. If you are not feeling good about what you're doing right now, get up, take a short walk, run outside, do something that's a little bit different. Okay. If you like to do yoga, music, gardening, new hobbies, over the fall, I took up paint by number just to begin to, it's one of those simple boxes that I used to do when I was a kid. Got to Target, picked it up, paint by number, just because it takes my mind off of everything else. It's just easy. It refocused me. Then the other thing is be patient. Loss is not replaced with something fast. Be patient. It takes time. It takes months. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes. My mother passed away over 30 years ago. There are still times I find that I need to be able to pay attention to that loss of my mom. And it can also pop up in the middle of other things. Like when my daughter leaves, it complicates and compounds a loss I may have had some years ago. So be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself.
And what I hear you say too, Kurt, is that this is normal. These are normal feelings. This is very common, but when it happens to you, it feels like you're the one person who's ever gone through this.
You're right. These are all normal, and there's a whole range of feelings that are related to it. Disbelief.
Why don't we talk about that? What are some of the emotions that people who are dealing with loss are likely to experience?
I think shock is one. It's like, I can't believe that I've just lost this person, or I can't believe I got let go at work. I mean, that's a real ego challenge. Okay, that strikes at the center. Sometimes anger, because it's like we are unable to understand why we have lost someone or something. So we may get angry. Things to do. We may be humiliated by losing a job. Confusion. It's like, well, what do I do next? What are supposed to be the things that I need? I got to take care of my family. So what am I supposed to go do next? Okay. That's back to that stop, sit, and think, let's get it focused. We can sometimes feel guilty about what took place. And sometimes we can move into despair. we've allowed ourselves to get too far into the emotions that are normal. We have to continue to help ourselves find ways to address and be aware of those emotions, and especially speak about those emotions. Because one, all of this in a great loss can be exhausting. And that's back to the physical and the needs of exercise and sleep in particular. So quite a range of feelings, but again, normal, as you say. And we will all go through those in a variety of ways.
On the flip side of that, what are some examples of unhealthy ways to cope with loss?
I think, especially during these days in the pandemic, it's easy to isolate ourselves, and that's not a good thing. Even for healthy individuals, isolating is not good because we are social beings. And when we begin to isolate ourselves, we are not accessing the connection our spirit needs, our heart needs. And so avoid isolating at as best cost as possible and remaining safe, of course, right now in these days. And try not to ignore your feelings. That goes back to that journaling. Okay. Don't stuff them. Don't ignore them. That's not happening to me. Or, it's like, oh, I can take care of this on my own. That's denying and ignoring. And so do your best to continue to address and share those feelings with friends and family members, of course, that you trust. Another thing is probably avoid making major life changes.
Good point.
Okay? Because you might be making them for the wrong reasons, based on your emotions that feel like you want to do something. Again, stop, sit, think. Give yourself a chance to take in, absorb what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what's going on around you. As a counselor I used to see, we'll talk more about that, he used to say, pay attention. What's the evidence around you? Life is still happening. Folks are still doing their thing. You still have yourself. You still have these resources, whatever you've been able to identify. What's going on around you? So take stock, pay attention to the evidence. So probably, avoid moving. If you're in a serious relationship, maybe avoid even marrying right now, just because there's a great loss that clouds good judgment at the time.
You mentioned going to see a counselor yourself. Can you go deeper into that story, Kurt? Because I think many people may be able to relate to that as well.
Some years ago, a combination of losing the job and I think complications by my unresolved grief, maybe with the loss of my mother over the years, I needed to get some professional help that was more than visiting with my friends, visiting with my family. I needed to have someone help me sort this out, because someone that has the ability and the skills to help me think about the things that are important to think about, identifying the feelings that I'm dealing with, and beginning to identify possible resources in addressing those and trying to help yourself through the situation. And I've spent a good time sometimes in a very intense weekly basis for a little while, until I needed till I was able to get some help through that time, and then extended out to a monthly, and then if necessary for a check-in process. But an opportunity to meet and visit with licensed clinical social workers, a psychologist, several different types of people who are able to do this, and checking in with the county mental health area to find out where some of these resources could be found.
What I'm hearing you say is not to feel ashamed or embarrassed for the need to go to a counselor, but think of that as a sign of strength, that you're using your resources wisely to reach out to someone who could really walk you through this, instead of just bottling it up and saying, I'm going to handle this, as you mentioned, denial, I can take care of this myself. Just be vulnerable, because that's one way to release this and begin to move forward.
Very true. And being male in our culture, I think the bigger challenge is, the the label, you know, it is a sign of strength to seek out the help you need, and to have someone professionally support and help you through something, because going it your alone is you're going to miss things, and you're going to allow things to get away from you, and you're not going to become as healthy through the process.
Right, right. Now, when a person hears about what they call the stages of grief, what are they and how does a person move through those? Kind of guide us through the process.
Stages of grief is a terminology that some research was done some years ago in the 60s, and it's identified affective states. Essentially, shock and denial is one of them. Anger is another. Bargaining, depression, and acceptation. And that's kind of been a flow in that order over many, many years, but more so it's come to learn that it's not that it's one you get through and go to the next. These happen invariably at a multitude of times throughout your grieving, throughout your dealing with your loss. You may find yourself in shock and denial, you know, some months down the road, as opposed to early on. And you may gain acceptance of some of the issues that you're dealing with early on along the way and be healthy about that, but then you have to come back to some other things that may have not been fully addressed. So those are kind of the stages of grief. Is a terminology that just helps people maybe name some of the affective states that they might be in, and then recognizing, well, gee, these are some of the things I need to be doing at this time, because I might be dealing with this state, this emotion.
I'll share a personal story myself. My father passed away back in July of last year, and I went to see her just anticipating I'm going to be a mess. I need to help think through this. And what the counselor talked with me about was, he said, Derek, picture that you and your sister and your mom and everybody else related to your dad, they're like in separate rowboats in the swamp. And you're just rowing around. And some days you're rowing and it's very smooth. Other days there's an alligator about to bite your arm off. You don't know what's coming. And all of you may be having good days and bad days at different times. And all of you may not understand how come you're feeling good today when I'm feeling bad? And people can't relate. And he just said, everybody has their own rowboat. They're kind of rowing in it. And at one point in life, you eventually get to the shore, but you never, ever forget the swamp. You may just think about it differently, but you made it through. And there may be times where there may be some of those triggers, that there may be a smell or a sound that takes you back to that person, and
Right.
it's go backwards and you feel like what's happening. Walk us through from that standpoint. I mean, your mom passed 30 years ago, but it's your mom. You know, what are some of those things you've experienced, kind of those triggers, and how did you kind of get through those and even still get through them today?
The intensity has very much, reduced. And one of the things that early on, and I'd say in the first 10 years, whenever her birthday was coming up, and it could be 2 weeks in advance of that birthday, I could begin to get irritable. And I wasn't necessarily paying attention to it. And then my wife, of course, is saying, "What's up?" So it took a little while, probably a couple of years, to figure out that my body started sensing things or my spirit, that around my mother's birthday. And so what we began to do is try and pay attention to that. And especially when we got closer, we would begin to do something that we could remember mom by. My mother was buried in southern Indiana, so I can't exactly visit the grave. But what we can do is plant a rose bush in the front yard that we can see, because it's in May that she passed. I'm sorry, in her birthday. And so what it is we get a rose bush, and there's a beautiful rose in the springtime, that can be helpful as something hopeful in the process. So you're right. It's those things you got to pay attention to, because they're all of a sudden they're not there. And now, how do I celebrate this? Even so much so on the day she passed, is I pay attention to what's coming up a week or two in advance of that, it's likely that I could be irritable or have some sense of that. And recently, more specifically, with back to my daughter who moved, I shouldn't say moved back to Chicago. She came for 4 months and just returned to Chicago. She's our only, and it was like sending her off to college again. She's in her late 20s, and it was kind of like I got used to her being here, and what fun we had, doing some things together in these months, and all of a sudden she's not there. So on Monday mornings, she's now calling me, so that these last 4 Monday mornings since she's been gone, we're checking in, because those tend to be a little harder day for me.
I mean, coffee virtually. Well, someone listening right now, Kurt, may feel stuck and isolated as they grieve through the loss of a parent, relative, or job or life experience. And they might have a hard time believing things will ever be the same, or they may feel happy again. From your personal experience, will things ever get back to normal? And what does normal mean?
Yes, things will get back and better. Normal may not be the term that is easy to use these days, a variety of terms, but things will get better because you're doing the work. You're thinking, you're journaling, you're sharing, you're doing those things. One of the key pieces back to job loss is networking, beginning to visit with others, not for the job, but for the networking. Just so that you're beginning to continue to be with people who are doing things that you're going to be doing sometime in the near future. Yes, it does get better. And you create your own new plateau for a while, I think is maybe a good word, to help you move to the next plateau. Because you got to get some stability in those smaller strides along the way to be able to reach the bigger strides for the long run.
And one thing I take away too is that loss is very common, very normal. And I think when I had a friend or family member or someone I know who has lost a loved one, I would say to them, I'm so sorry for your loss. Now I can truly say, I understand your loss. But what I have learned is I never say to them, hey, I know how you feel, because I never can know how they feel because I don't. But I can say, I will walk alongside you through this time of grief. And I think it helps people understand that we're all sort of in this together.
Very much so. I think that goes back to this, we're social beings. Living alone is sometimes nice. People enjoy that for a while, but also we still do connect. And it's the connection that continues to fuel our spirit as we continue this journey.
So, Kurt, for someone who may feel like they need help or support while they grieve, what would you suggest they do?
I would say, one, if they've got a physician, to inquire about getting some referral. If they don't have a physician, maybe check in with, I'm thinking urgent cares, and seeing if they might be able to make some referral for a mental health professional. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think Tarrant County in this case has referral, a mental health department that I'm sure there could be some referrals. I think the key piece is seek out the support you need. And one piece of information can be, a real helpful piece to the next piece of information that you may need.
And also, I think too, not to look at this as a sign of weakness, but to say, look, for me to move forward and really advance, this is strength. This is me advancing. To get better, I'm going to have to do some things I may be uncomfortable with.
I think we should all pay attention to that analogy, because it's in athletics. The training, it's a training process.
Yes.
To overcome loss is what we need to be able to do and put ourselves in. And we need others along the way to help us out to do that.
Kurt, well said. Kurt Bartley, thank you for talking about how to cope with loss. I think that all of you watching can benefit greatly from this. Take some notes, watch this many times. Kurt has shared some real wisdom. Kurt, thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome, Derek. Thanks for setting this up, and best wishes to each of you who are watching this. Things will get better.